What's up guys, Sunil here from Learning Led Education with a tutorial on how to write a C program to calculate the factorial of a number. So a factorial of a non-negative integer n, which is denoted by this NOT symbol, is the product of all positive integers less than or equal to n. For example, if we have to calculate the n factorial, the factorial of this number n, then we need to multiply n with the n minus 1 with the n minus 2 and similarly up to 1. Another example, let's say we need to calculate 3 factorial, then it's going to be equal to 3 into 2 into 1. And another thing is, the factorial of the number 0 is equal to 1. So if you have the 0 as a number, then the factorial value is 1. Otherwise, the factorial of a number is the product of all positive integers less than or equal to that number. So here in this tutorial, what we're going to do is, we're going to ask the user to enter a number, and then we're going to calculate the factorial of that number. So the first thing that we're going to do is, we're going to create some variables in our program, and we're going to create the integer variables. And the first variable that we need is to store the value entered by the user. So I'm going to call it as number. And then we're going to use a loop in our program to calculate the product of the numbers. So let's create the counter variable. And also we're going to need another variable to store the calculated factorial of the number. So I'm going to call it as fact, and I'm going to initialize this fact with a value of 1. And the next thing that we're going to do is, we're going to ask the user to enter the number to find out the factorial. So I'm going to use a printf function, and I'm going to say enter the number to calculate factorial. And then let's add a new line just to make it pretty. And then we're going to receive the value entered by the user. So I'm going to use the scanf function, and we're going to be using the format specifier as %d, and we're going to store that value in our number variable. And the next thing that we need to do is, we need to check whether the number entered by the user is a negative integer. If it is so, then we can't calculate the factorial of a number. So to calculate the factorial of a number, we need the non-negative integers. So I'm going to use the if statement, and I'm going to check whether this number is containing a value which is less than 0. If it is so, it's going to mean that, the entered number is a negative number. So I'm going to say that using the printf statement. Just going to say enter non-negative number, else if this number is containing a value greater than or equal to 0, then we can calculate the factorial. And here what we're going to do is, we're going to use a for loop to calculate the factorial. So for example, if the user is going to enter a value of 5, and then what we need to do is to calculate the factorial of this 5, we need to perform 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1. So I'm going to use the for loop here, and it's going to be for, and we're going to initialize our counter variable with the value of the number variable. So if the user is going to enter 5, then this counter variable is going to contain 5. If the user is going to enter 10, then this counter variable is going to contain 10. And the next thing that we're going to do is, we're going to check whether the counter value is greater than or equal to 1. Or, in other words, we want to execute this for loop till this counter value is greater than or equal to 1. When it becomes less than or equal to 1, we want to terminate. And then we're going to decrement the value of this counter variable, because at some point we want our loop to terminate, so we need to decrement here. And here inside this for loop, what we're going to do is we're going to write fact, the variable which is created for storing the factorial value, equal to fact multiply that with the value of counter. So here what happens is, if the user is going to enter 5, or if the user want to find the factorial of the number 5, then this counter variable here is going to contain the value of 5 first, and this condition satisfies 5 is greater than or equal to 1, and that's why here this statement will be executed, and fact, which is the variable that we have created, is containing the value of 1, and here fact equal to fact multiply counter, so it's gonna be fact equal to 1 star 5. So this fact is gonna contain 5, and then the loop will be decremented. This counter is gonna contain 4, and again this condition satisfies, and again this statement will be executed. This time fact equal to fact star counter, so it's gonna be 5, the value stored in this fact, which is 5 because of the previous iteration, multiply the value of the counter, which is 4. So the fact is going to contain 20 now, and then the counter value will be decremented, and similarly this loop will execute until the counter value is going to contain 1. So at the end of this loop, this fact variable is going to contain factorial value for the number entered. So in this case it's going to contain 5 into 4 into 3 into 2 into 1, which is going to be 120. And the last thing that we're going to do is we're going to print out the factorial value calculated. So I'm going to use a printf statement outside the for loop, and it's just going to say factorial of %d is %d, and here we're going to refer number and fact. That's it. Now I'm going to save this program, and I'm going to go to build and run, and it says enter the number to calculate factorial. I'm going to enter 5, and I'm going to hit enter. It says factorial of 5 is 120. I'm going to run this program again and enter the number. So I'm just going to enter 2, hit enter. Factorial of 2 is 2, and run it again, and let's say we're going to enter -5, and if I hit enter, it says enter non-negative number, and run it again for the last time, and we're going to enter 0, and if I hit enter, it says 1. So you may ask me, like, in our program we haven't checked whether the number is containing value of 0 or not. Then how come it can calculate the factorial of 0 is 1? So here what happens is we have initialized our fact variable with a value of 1, and if this number which is the value entered by the user is 0, at that time this if statement fails, because 0 is not less than 0, 0 is equal to 0, not less than 0. So this statement fails, and that's why we execute the else part, and here this counter variable will be initialized to 0, which is the value stored in this number variable. So here 0 is not greater than or equal to 1. This condition fails, and we are not going to execute this loop. Not even once we're going to execute this loop, and it's just going to print out this statement. So it says factorial of 0, which is the value stored in this number variable, is 1, because we have initialized this fact variable with a value of 1. So this is it, guys. This is how you guys can write a C program to calculate the factorial of a number. And also you guys can check out my website for the source code of this tutorial, and follow us on Twitter, like our Facebook page, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.